The following story is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. Up until recently, I was totally comfortable with being home alone. I'm a young woman in my 20s, so I'm often reminded that many people like me are not lucky enough to be so comfortable for lots of different reasons. And a few weeks ago, I got another reason. I was between roommates at the time. My previous roommate had just moved out a week ago, and my new roommate was still gradually moving his stuff in, but he wasn't sleeping in the apartment yet. He hadn't gotten a chance to move his mattress and some furniture in yet, so it was the first time in a while that I spent the entire night alone in the apartment, and for several nights in a row. The first and the second nights were completely uneventful, but later in the week is when it all happened. I stayed up late from watching Netflix until about 2 in the morning, and I was just settling in, quickly drifting off into sleep, when I heard a strange series of noises coming from right outside the house. I got a little nervous, but I quickly thought it was probably just my new roommate coming in and fumbling with his key trying to unlock the front door since the house is new to him. But then I remembered. He said that he wouldn't be home that night. So then I just thought it was probably my cats running around all crazy and blowing off some energy that they built up throughout the day. Cats tend to do this. However, when I lifted up my head and looked around my room, I counted both of my cats in there with me. In that moment, I finally got the sinking sensation that something was wrong. And those noises outside were still happening. They were actually getting louder and louder as time passed. And as time passed, my anxiety grew larger and larger, and I wasn't really as sleepy anymore. And now I was actually able to decipher exactly what was going on. And I knew I was hearing the sound of the lock from the sliding glass door to my patio being jiggled around. I knew this because it's a very distinct sound, and the fright of the whole situation was making me feel like I had superhuman hearing. But then, to my horror, I heard the latch to the patio door turn over, and a moment later I heard the glass door was sliding open slowly. I immediately jumped out of my bed and shut my bedroom door, locking it and wedging up a chair underneath the handle. I ran over to my nightstand and I picked my phone up. I didn't hesitate to dial 911, but my hands were shaking. Within a few seconds, the dispatcher picked up, and I started frantically whispering to the dispatcher what was going on. And I knew that somebody was breaking into the house and I needed them to send somebody. They assured me that they were sending officers to my address and that they would be here within a few minutes. They told me not to confront the intruder and to find a safe space to hide while they were waiting on the line. I said okay. I quickly started to look around, but I just couldn't think of anywhere to go. I got claustrophobic. I could hide under my bed or in the shower, but those are way too obvious. I could open up my window, pop my screen out and climb out that way. This could have worked easily since I was only on the first floor, but then the anxiety coursing through my veins put the thought in my head that there could be somebody else out there waiting to grab me as soon as I tried to make an escape. Suddenly, my thoughts were interrupted by whoever it was in my apartment trying to open my bedroom door. The room was so quiet, but my thoughts were so loud, and suddenly everything was interrupted when I heard the door handle to my bedroom jiggle very slowly. This sent chills down my spine. My heart rate and blood pressure spiked, higher than it's ever been. I was terrified. I knew that if they were able to get through the lock on the patio door, then they could easily pick the lock on my bedroom door. The handle was shaking slightly, and every couple seconds it would make a popping sound, and it got more aggressive, so it sounded like they were picking the lock to my bedroom door. Without any better ideas, all I could do was scream at the top of my lungs. I yelled and I told them to get out of my house. I told them the police were on the way and they'd be here any second now. And as I yelled, I was hoping the intruder would run. But the lock-picking sounds from the bedroom door got louder and louder and more aggressive. And then it suddenly stopped. For a brief second, there was no noise. Then the worst thing imaginable happened. My heart sank as I saw the door handle turn downwards. The intruder managed to unlock my bedroom door, and the door was slowly swinging open. I saw a dark figure behind the crack of the door as the person slowly opened the door, despite my efforts to jam the door. In that brief moment, I jumped up and ran towards the door and shut it closed. I fought the person behind the door and I managed to lock the door handle back. I knew this person knew how to open this door, so I locked it and I ran to my bathroom door and I locked that door. I heard a loud bang. The intruder body slammed into the door, trying to get in. I heard them picking the lock, but I also heard the intruder groaning in pain. Them slamming into the door must have hurt them, but that didn't matter right now. Things were getting more and more dire by the second. I picked up my phone and I yelled to the 911 dispatcher, who was still waiting on the line, to hurry up, because this person was about to get me. I looked around for something I could defend myself with. I heard my bedroom door swing open slowly again. I grab a screwdriver that was sitting in my drawer, and I back up, and I sit in the bathtub waiting for this person to come in. I readied myself for when the bathroom door opened. I was going to defend myself to the best of my ability. Thankfully, it didn't come to that. At last I heard police sirens outside. The intruder gave up, and I heard the door handle to the bathroom stop jiggling. Not even 15 seconds later, I hear police swarm the inside of my house, yelling. A police officer kicked down the bathroom door with his gun drawn, and I started crying. The police officer comforted me and took me outside as we talked. I was shaken up, and I couldn't really speak as well as I usually do. But my heart dropped when they told me that he got away. They did say they would find him, but knowing that he's still out there somewhere didn't make me feel any better. A few weeks later, I tell this story to my new roommate. He apologized profusely. He promised to start staying in the apartment at night. He would also promise me that he would make sure I'm never home alone again. I agreed at the time because I was still shaken up, and I don't know how long I'll keep inconveniencing him for it. I just don't like how there are people in this world that could make me feel so uncomfortable in my own home. The amount of trauma that I got from this is irreparable. But one thing that I do wonder about this is who that person was, because to this day he's still out there. I know it sounds terrible, but there's still part of me that actually thinks the intruder was my roommate. But I just don't know for sure. But what I do know for sure is he was the only one that knew that I was home alone that night. When I was much younger, my parents had always told me to never open the door for anybody when they weren't home, no matter what. Unfortunately, I was a very hard-headed kid, and I didn't always adhere to that. I had always thought since we were in a gated community, we would never have that sort of problem in our neighborhood. But one day, I found out that I was wrong. It was one of the first times I was ever home alone later than usual. My parents had left for the evening to see my sister participate in a school orchestra. I barely managed to weasel out myself, but my parents let me stay home. My parents pointed me towards the microwavable food in the freezer and told me the usual list of things to do, as well as the list of things to not do when they were gone. That being never opening the door. So, I got the whole house to myself. I immediately watching TV in the living room like any normal kid. I wanted to see Adult Swim come on at 8 p.m., as I never got a chance to watch it because my parents always turned the TV off before then. However, before I could even make that happen, there was a knock at the door. It was a very loud and aggressive knock. It made me jump up, but at first I was planning on ignoring it. Less than a minute later passed, and whoever knocked even more aggressively this time. I also heard them shouting something, but I just couldn't understand it.
Hi, it's Ricky from Snake One.
I was a little frightened, but I was more curious and annoyed. So I quietly got up and I sneaked over to the door. I looked through the peephole, and it appeared that it was a solicitor of some type standing outside. I could tell by the work clothes and the khaki pants that they were wearing, and the big white van parked outside on the curb. While I was eyeing him through the peephole, he knocked again. And this time, when he shouted, I heard him very well. He had said something like he was inspecting houses for a roofing company. This sounded like a real enough reason to me, but obviously I didn't know any better at this age. It was definitely weird that he was doing this so late in the day, but I figured since my house was towards the back of the neighborhood, he was probably almost done hitting all the houses. We would get door-to-door salesmen from time to time, and even though I never understood what they were trying to sell, I always remember my parents did the polite thing of opening the door to greet them and to kindly decline whatever they were offering to sell. For some reason, I got it in my head that I should practice the same thing that my parents do. So I did the foolish thing of opening the door to talk to the salesman. I was so nervous. I didn't even really say hello or even greet him. I just slowly opened the door, and as I did it, the man's gaze dropped down on me, and he grinned from ear to ear. It almost looked inhuman. The first thing he said enthusiastically was,
Hi there, little man. Are your parents home?
I tried to not answer that, but I just couldn't help, shaking my head. This fed into things turning out very poorly from this point on.
Oh, well, that's alright. You're in charge of things now, aren't you? I guess I can talk to you, huh?
He took a step closer to me. Instinctively, I took a step back, and I wasn't able to touch the front door anymore. That's how far back I stood. I tried to break the silence with some kind of response, and I was able to get something out, as I said,
Talk to me about what?
When I said this, oddly the man became even more enthusiastic. His eyes even started to shimmer a little bit, and I just couldn't forget that look that he gave me, standing in my doorway, basically in my house, looking down at me. Then he says,
Well, we need to talk about your parents' roof, buddy. It looks like they need a new one.
I knew nothing about roofs. I didn't know how much longer I could entertain this. Suddenly, the man was bending over at this point, inching closer and closer to my face. I leaned back and abruptly I stepped towards the door to slowly close it. And I told him that I didn't know anything about roofs at all. But then the man put his hand up on the door, blocking me from closing it.
Hey, don't worry, buddy. I know all about them. I just need to get inside for a closer look to do an evaluation. And then I can tell you for sure.
I pushed the door back a little, and then I asked,
Why do you need to get in?
The man licked his lips really slowly before he responded. He even stuttered for a split second, and then he said,
Well, the best way to see the condition of the roof is actually to look at it from underneath, inside the attic.
When he said this, it made my skin crawl. For some reason, when he was close enough for his breath to touch my face, my stomach did a somersault and I immediately said, "No thank you." I tried to slam the door shut, but right before it could fully close, the creep jammed his foot right into the doorway. All of a sudden, he wasn't trying to be nice to me anymore. He was growling and spitting at me as we fought back and forth. His enthusiasm quickly turned into a psychotic rage as he yelled,
Open the damn door right now and let me in.
All I could think to do was to start screaming as loud as I could. The look on the man's face when I yelled turned into a sour expression. Just so hateful. It's like I pissed him off for wasting his time. But thankfully it was loud enough for him to back off. And he slowly backed away from the door. And he got into his van, turned it on, and then sped off. I slammed the door and locked it tight. Then I collapsed on the floor and I started crying. I was crying for about 15 minutes. This was the most intense situation that I had ever imagined myself dealing with, and I was not ready for it. Realistically though, I've never told anybody in my family about it though. I just didn't want to get into trouble for opening the door to a stranger, and obviously for the stupid reason that I didn't want my parents to stop letting me be home alone. These days, I'm realizing now that this needs to be something that I can open up about. But for now, I'm just going to remain anonymous as I try to process this. I've never seen that man come by ever again. And anytime somebody's ever at the front door, I always think it's that man coming back to get me.